I'd like to start with the land acknowledgement that where I live in Nova Scotia, Canada, it's the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. So much of our daily life is affected by our neuroception, our unconscious assessment of safety and threat. So it's trying to be helpful, even though it often doesn't really work out that way, but it's trying to suppress what feels harmful or threatening or overwhelming because we feel like we can't handle it. And we all have ways that we escape. Some of them are healthier than other ways. We go into fight, flight, freeze, and then out come our strategies. So some people go shopping, online probably more now with COVID. Drink too much, eat, get super busy. So working too much is another way that we insulate ourselves. Many people zone out on screens. And then, of course, our body cooperates with some of these by hits of dopamine. We are very much reinforcing things that help us to calm down or to suppress or to not be present for what's here. And so we're kind of working with being mindful of what it is that we want to do about whatever's happening in our nervous system, and really knowing that a lot of those are not healthy for us. In an attempt to get some ground under our feet, we argue with reality. And we have this fundamental resistance. So if I was to look back at how I thought my life was going to be, and we can all do this, most of us would never predict how our lives actually turned out. And some of the things that we felt at the time that we just couldn't handle have turned out to be something, of course, we did handle. And then we have this reality of if things were different in our lives and in the external world, we would feel better. We wouldn't feel so frustrated. We wouldn't be so afraid, anxious. That's the truth. So if we have a partner who drinks, or if we're just kind of really at odds with the way that people are treating each other and how little compassion and room there is, or it seems with a lot of people anyway, to really honor each other, even when we don't agree with each other. There's all the things that are going on in the world that we feel so engaged and passionate about, like racism and children going to bed hungry and people being vaccinated or not. And the real fear and the real life outcome, if more people were masking and vaccinated, there wouldn't be as much COVID. And then our children who are going to school would be safer. So we're not at all saying that this isn't true. And one of the things about accepting reality is that we have to accept that we don't get to control it. We don't get to decide for other people how they're going to think about something, what kind of actions they're going to take. So if we can, on the inside, really feel and let it in and see what it is that we're struggling with, what we think shouldn't be, then that inner acceptance of actually, even though I hate the way that that is, I accept that that is how it is. That also helps to resolve our fears and helps to resolve that compulsiveness in the mind, the anger, the it should be a different way. We get very emotionally flooded when we get really hooked on this. Many of you, I'm sure, love Lily Tomlin as much as I do. And this is from her and her partner. Reality is the leading cause of stress amongst those in touch with it. So what we do know about reality is that we can't win. There's some things that we can influence about reality in our daily life. If we go for walks, we know that we'll get some calming from that. If we have certain kinds of relationships, we know that we can influence some of what's going on, but we can't control it. And we have this nervous system and the primitive brain that wants to avoid pain, so we push away those things. And then we cling to some things that we enjoy, things that make us happy. And these habits started from when we were very young. So when we were a child and we literally could not handle what was going on. We really needed the adults in our life, our parents or other people, to be emotionally self-regulated and help us to co-regulate, and that didn't happen for so many of us. But now that we're adults, we have more options and we have more agency, and yet we still have this old, very persistent pattern that rules a lot of how we approach things. So let's just stop here for a moment and notice what that feels like to acknowledge. That's just how the nervous system works. That's how most of us approach life. It's very normal, and that's how our systems were built, to avoid pain and move towards pleasure. We have attachment, we have repulsion or aversion, and then we have life just as it is. This picture is from a place that I used to love to go to in British Columbia. And there would be floods in the spring, and then all of the debris, these down trees and things, it was deep in a rainforest, would just kind of fall all over the place, and they'd get in the stream, and then there's lots of rocks and different things there too. So there's a lot that the water had to go around. And in the spring, it would be flooding, and it would just be roaring down there. And then later in the summer, there'd be little waterfalls, and it would be a little bit calmer. But it just really reminds me of the mess that a lot of us have inside of us. We've not been able to allow everything to be as it is. And so because that's true, we've suppressed, we've resisted, and we create these blockages. And then we try to work around them. But it takes a lot of energy to do that. So some things, even hard things, and sometimes the really hard things, really bring us into this moment, and we let them in. So it's not true that we always avoid or suppress. It is true that it's a persistent pattern, but that's something that we can change as we work with it. So let's take a little bit of time here to really settle into an inquiry here. So the truth is, we don't like the way our life is. We don't like the way a lot of other people are moving about in their life. We don't like a lot of things. And part of that is fear that we have these fragile mammal bodies that are so affected by other people. We don't want to lose what we love. We don't want to get stuck in that negativity bias of the survival brain. But we also don't really have a lot of control over that, because that's what comes forward. That's how it works. So we have a lot of strength. We have a lot of resilience. And a lot of times we've really just opened ourselves to the present moment. And a lot of times we've avoided the present moment. So just knowing this, see what is coming forward. I accept that I have these avoidance strategies. I accept that I try to avoid pain. I accept that I try to use strategies to lessen the blow. It might be some kind of an addiction, something that people would say that's horrible to do, or sometimes we have a more socially acceptable one. What's your reality right now as you keep returning? Notice your body, notice your breath. What's here right now? And one of the ways that we know what's here right now is by paying attention to our body and breath. What are the sensations in your body? I don't want it to be this way. What are the thoughts that come up? One thing that we could do would be to just kind of do a little mental list of what it is that's here right now for you in your life. So not to forget the positive experiences as well. How would you describe your life if you ran into someone and they said, "Hey, it's been a year since we've seen each other," or maybe 20 years, but how are you doing? What's going on with your life? You'd probably say something about your family, your relationships. If you're doing some kind of work, what are you enjoying about your life? What's difficult? So maybe you have a half a dozen or so things of how you would explain what's happening in your external life. And what about if they were a really good friend and they asked you, and how is it that you're handling all of that? What's it like for you inside right now? What are you struggling with? What are you really enjoying? Are you sleeping well? Are you caught in some kind of a shame storm? Are you finding that it's overwhelming right now? What is it that you're struggling with? What's hard? And notice as you tune into that, what it feels like in your body and your breath. Stay really grounded here, just in this moment. And you might include other reflections like, I thought it would be this way, and it's actually more like this. One of the things I'm really enjoying about the lockdowns with COVID is that I'm not on the road so much. I'm home more, or whatever that might be for you. What are some of the things that are working out well, or maybe some of the strengths that you're noticing? I find I'm being much more on my own side. And because we're doing an inquiry, we're just looking to see what's here. There might be lots of different thoughts, or thoughts might be settling down a little bit, and you're coming back to your breath. Give it about another minute or so. But I don't want it to be this way. What are some of the details of the this way? One of the truths that it's hard to accept at times is that life is not going to be the way we want it to be. So if we look at what is the personal cost of that, one of the things that we could acknowledge is that pretty much all of us would rather go to the movie a reassuring lie than an inconvenient truth. But what does it cost us? So, one thing is that we can't really protect ourselves from what we can't allow ourselves to see. And this has happened so often in relationships. We might be connecting with someone who's contemptuous of us or not honoring our boundaries. And if we can't really see that because we have an attachment to them, then that can lead to a lot of suffering. Certainly, I know that experience. When we know the truth and we can't let it in, that's the source of a lot of this pervasive feeling of dread and anxiety. So, the truth is, when we look at some of the things that are happening in the external world, there's a fourth wave of COVID. happening in North America and many other places around the world. It's a variant that is more dangerous. It's more transmissible. So the truth is that we're more at risk than we were probably even a year ago in some ways. And also, people are really sick of the pandemic. It's like, I'm tired of this. I'm not going to let it control me. There's all kinds of reactions to that. But deep down, we know that there's a threat here, and it's a life and death threat. So it's a big, high level threat. So one of the ways that we work with that is we turn towards it and we let it in. And then we can work with reality. But that's a hard thing to do, especially every day, moment to moment. Another thing that happens is that we lose authentic connection. When we feel anxious and we need someone to be a certain way in order that we'll feel safe or we'll feel connected, we kind of objectify them. We lose our connection with them because we're not really allowing them, or we're not allowing it in who they really are. So we might be in a codependent relationship or something where they're going along, but the truth is that we don't have the depth of connection that we could. And this isn't to shame any of us. I know we all do that at times. It's just to see, what is the cost of that? The cost of it is that I'm not going to have as deep and authentic of a connection with that person. And part of it is because we don't have that with ourselves. So we disconnect from ourselves. That's a common trauma response. We disconnect through all these different ways, addictions, things that are going on in the mind. But the cost of that is that we can't really fully engage in our lives. And this suppression, this resistance that we have to reality as it is, means that we have much less life force and energy to actually enjoy our life as it is, or to meet it. We might not enjoy all of it, that's for sure, but just to meet it. This is my life right now, and I want to be here for it. So we're going to do this for probably 5 minutes or so, just to look at some of these sentences. I wholeheartedly accept reality is the inquiry, the reverse inquiry. Some of the background. I enjoy some of my reality and I hate other parts of it. That's normal. I know that at times I'm going to be scared and grieving and angry. And I also know that sometimes I will completely overflow with joy and wonder. And sometimes I'm able to be an adult and really cultivate the compassion and the capability and the commitment to staying present right now. And sometimes I feel more like a 2-year-old having a tantrum. I don't want it to be this way. It can't be this way. I can't handle it. It has to be different. And I know that one. I'm sure we all do on some level. So I wholeheartedly accept reality and stay in touch with what's going on. What are you experiencing? So we experience our environment in the external world, our personal relationships, and we experience that internal response to the environment. And we also have that deeper level or layer, however you would want to say that, of awareness. I'm not what's happening to me. I'm the one who's experiencing what's happening. And when we say, I wholeheartedly accept reality, notice to see what the hesitation is. And sometimes our mind will go into the future, into kind of a catastrophic thinking. Okay, I could accept this, but I can't accept that. And sometimes there'll be something right here that's like, I'm having so much trouble with this. It's really hard for me to accept that this is how it is. Let yourself kind of follow where your mind is taking you for a little bit. Check in with your body, relax your shoulders, take some breaths. I don't get to decide what my reality is. My reality is way more than just me. It's other people, it's close in other people in my personal life, it's billions of other people on the planet. I don't get to decide and control. And how do I feel about accepting it? Accepting reality. Continue to notice your relationship to what you're experiencing. Take that step back. I am aware of what I'm experiencing. And if you're interested in setting an intention, you can have your hand on your heart if you want. I continue to strengthen my willingness to surrender to the reality of the moment. To really acknowledge that this is hard. And what we're surrendering to is just the acknowledgement of what it is. We're not saying it's good or bad, that it's going to stay like this forever. We're just saying right now, this is what's here. And am I letting that in? Am I accepting it? Or am I resisting it? And if I'm resisting it, then that's the reality of what's here too. So to not shame ourselves, this is normal human stuff. It's okay to want things to be different than they are. It's okay to not want to suffer. It's okay to really hate what's going on right now and really want it to change. And sometimes we'll get involved in action that will help it to change, like climate justice, for instance. Other times it's more personal life things. Just to sit with that for another moment. I'm willing to continue to cultivate the strength that I have, the willingness that I have to be present with life as it is. And especially if I'm struggling with accepting what's happening, that I could be kind and compassionate. Be very soft and reassuring with myself. That's okay too. Let's take a moment to come back to the group.